Hey, my name's John. I'm a software engineer with about 10 years of experience. I help people land their next programming role. Check out my bio or latterly.io for more information on that. Today we are asking the question, how long does it take to learn to code? I organically ran across this interesting Twitter thread. It's quite long, and I thought we can exploit this, take advantage of this organic thread to get a bunch of samples. So I did that. I did a whole stream on this. I frequently stream. The link to the stream will be in the description, and I'll just basically get to the answer today. Before I get to the answer, there are a bunch of caveats we should deal with, because if you just look at the number, you're missing a lot of the learning experience, the learning journey. So let's scroll through, let's get a feel for some of the nuance, and then we will get to the result. So let's dive in. The first bit of nuance is humor. We can see Mark says, about a weekend if you ask Hacker Noon. When you look at the final distribution, you'll notice a bunch of the results are zeros. These are humorous answers, don't take them too seriously. So we need to be mindful of the outliers, and I will report percentile numbers like 10, 20, 75, 25. And you probably want to look at that middle range and ignore the outliers for reasons like humor. Another bit of nuance is noted in Zach's tweet. Took me 3 to 6 months to learn Python for data processing, another few months to be able to do front-end work. And the way that we processed the tweets, this would capture 3 as a minimum, 6 as a maximum, and it would calculate a point estimate in the middle at 4.5 months to learn to code for Zach. You can also understand that Zach will have learned one language, learned another language, and at some later point gotten a job. So another bit of nuance is, some of these tweets are answering the question, how long does it take to learn to code? Some of these tweets are answering the question, how long does it take to learn to code and get a job? And so I will report those figures separately. And in some cases, it was hard for the process that we used to understand which was the referent. To give you a preview, I used GPT-4 with the code compiler to help me understand this Twitter thread. I also did some manual scraping. This is all open source in the AI Snacks repository. You can see we're here under the Time to Learn Coding Twitter thread, the README file. I'll update the README as soon as this is published, but you can see all of the scripts that were used, how we scraped the DOM to get the tweet data out, the Python files that were used to further clean it and finally process it, as well as all of the chats with the GPT-4 code compiler and exactly what was said. GPT-4 here was really underwhelming, in my opinion. So it was not able to very well handle unstructured data. I ended up spending hours on this, and I really had to handhold GPT-4, which I found surprising. I thought I would be able to basically print this to PDF, send it the PDF, and have it extract the result. Not the case. Author Leishman says, if you know PHP, React, and a few frameworks, you can get a job fast. C# is trickier. So there's 2 bits of nuance captured here. The first is that I had to drill into this nested conversation, and that will not be captured at the top level, and we only scraped the top level. The second bit of nuance is that we're asking about learning to code across the board, and we know that, in fact, certain programming languages, certain libraries are slower or faster to learn and will help you land a job slower or faster. I completely +1 and agree that we should be learning React if the goal is to get a job as quickly as possible. Great, so I think that gives you a feel for this Twitter thread. I'll also just add, I've done some research in this area on the duration of optimal education. The paper is open on SSRN, and you can see that duration is really important to employers. It's highly significant in every model that I tested. Positive linear effect, negative quadratic effect, that's common for diminishing marginal returns. So you don't want just an infinitely long course. And based on this research I did, the 6 to 9 month range for a learning course is really ideal. For a final note on caveats, let's ask GPT-4. I told GPT-4 interpreting learning experiences on the basis of the histogram alone, so I'll show you a graph in a moment. But interpreting that graph in isolation misses important nuance, can lead to incorrect conclusions. Provide 4 important caveats. So these are from the perspective of GPT-4. These are the highlights based on analyzing those tweets. First, learning pace. Second, the quality of learning experience. So who you're learning from is really important. The learning path, whether you are in a CS degree program, a boot camp, self-study, mentorship. These are really important determinants of how quickly you're going to learn. And individuals have different levels of support and guidance and personal resources. They're in their own personal situations, which they may have more or less time, more or less learning-friendly environments, and so on. So here we are back in the AI Snacks README, and now we are at the summary results section. First graph is the distribution of learning time and job landing time. So treating these as two separate things, we notice there's some outliers over here. Actually, there's one of each kind. And then the distributions themselves largely overlap. I also notice that there are zeros within the distribution, which I take to be humorous. So I don't think this is a true distribution of actual learning time. I think this is a true distribution of learning time response or espoused learning time, inclusive of humor effects. So I think if we were to remove those humor effects, we would see the thing shift slightly to the right. And indeed, we notice that when people talk about job landing time, this is the darker graph, and it is also sort of slightly shifted to the right itself with reduced humor. So we do see some correlation between the reduction of humor and the shifting right of the time. They fail a difference in means test. I think these are two different things. I think we just don't have enough samples to distinguish the distributions. So at a high level, they follow a similar distribution, so let's merge them in. We have these outliers. It might be that these outlier responses are including college time and that these other people are not. That might be why there's such a massive gap there. Or there might be something else going on. In any case, let's trim those out. We get this normalized time, and notice no one is getting through college in 150 days. So this would be ignoring something like college. And we have the 25th and the 75th percentiles noted in red. And I think this is pretty much the answer here. Here we have a table of descriptive statistics that helps us understand what's going on beyond those graphs alone. Notice the really modest sample sizes, really long Twitter thread, but only a fraction of them had hard numbers in there. In addition, the way that the data was scraped and processed ended up not capturing a lot of results. I think if you went carefully by hand, including all of the nested conversations, you could easily get 50% more samples. So the minimum here is stable at 0. No one is learning to code and landing a job at 0. I think these responses are humorous. I think 11 days is also in the joke range. So this 10% boundary is not stable, and 60 days may be somewhat serious, but in general, this still falls into the humorous range in my opinion. But notice that the 25 percentile, the interquartile range, is stable and serious. So despite the difference in the distributions, despite the outliers, printing the outliers, despite various statistical complications, that number remains stable, which is an impressive result for such a small sample size, in my opinion. And the upper quartile is pretty stable as well. We have a slight variation at job landing time. The variation is about a week, less than 5%. I don't think it's practically very meaningful. So I think in general, we can trust this normalized time, so that if you're interested in learning to program, you should count on spending 90 to 180 days. And I hope you found this to be an interesting study. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.